David Sirota's here.
So for everybody, really quick, make sure you hit the subscribe button, like, comment, and share, and also retweet if you're on Twitter. Make sure you get everybody over to YouTube. We are very pleased to welcome into the studio Bernie's press.
Well, yes, Bernie's speechwriter. But David Sirota is a journalist, an actual journalist. This is something that I delineate for people on a regular basis. But this is a real journalist. Hi.
Hey there.
How are you?
I'm good.
Welcome, my friend.
You always have to do that.
Oh, excuse me. Well, there you go. Now it looks really good. So what's the shirt you're rocking? The Spectrum?
What is that?
Yeah, the Philadelphia Spectrum.
Well,
is it Jim? Is that what it is?
Well, it's probably like a Rocky reference, right?
Yeah, no, it's the old stadium that the Sixers used to play in.
Oh, yeah.
You should know that.
Well, I know that.
How do you not know that?
I was saying it was a Rocky reference because you always put the Spectrum,
And that's where you're from, right? You're from Philly.
Yeah, I grew up in Philly, yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I did do a little research and saw that you are a fellow Northwestern alum, so that pleased me.
I am.
And not just any Northwestern, but Medill, like me.
Did you go to Northwestern?
I have a master's. I was there at Medill at the IMC program from 93 to 94. It was like a 5-term master's program, but yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, you and I are never going to get along because I'm a Giants fan and you're probably definitely an Eagles fan. So,
I was an Eagles fan. I don't pay much attention to NFL anymore. But yeah, I guess. Yeah, in the NFC, I'm an Eagles fan. I'm technically supposed to be a Broncos fan now, where I live.
Oh, well, listen, the Broncos fan base is amazing. It covers that entire Western region outside of whether you're a Seahawks fan. But we're not gonna dive too deep into sports.
No, I know you want to. I know you want to. But no, and I came across some other interesting little tidbits of information about you that I thought were kind of fun. I feel like you and I could commiserate because I think we both supported John Edwards at one point.
Oh, a long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, same. But I saw that, and because to me, that's this one thing in my mind where I'm like, oh, how did I not see that?
Yeah. It was pretty bad what happened with him. Yeah.
I would like you to share with our audience what you've been up to since the campaign. Obviously, Daily Poster is taking off, and we're very happy to see that. So if you can share a little bit about what that particular publication is all about and why being a part of that would be better than, most of the mainstream news that's going on these days.
Yeah, I launched a journalism organization where we do investigative journalism. We follow the money, hold both parties accountable. It was what I was doing before I went to the Bernie campaign, was doing journalism for many years. Took a hiatus to work on the campaign. I had worked for Bernie 20 plus years ago on Capitol Hill. So he asked me to work on his 2020 campaign, which I did. And now you can find our work at dailyposter.com. And we, we do real journalism. That's what we do.
Yeah, people don't understand that. It's funny because, I am not doing that now, but as somebody who has a journalism undergraduate degree and spent time at Medill, I understand the concept, and it's amazing to me what we settle for now, what people think is journalism. And I'm old enough to remember that when news anchors were journalists, there was a point in time, it ended with the Brokaw, Rather, and Jennings was the last generation of actual reporting journalists that sat in those seats. And now it's people think that the news is news.
Yeah.
And it's corporate propaganda. And, what are some of, I always tell people follow the money. So if somebody is getting paid, to sit there and do corporate talking points, or they're being sponsored by, Raytheon, probably you're not getting independent reporting.
I would agree, or at least the news organization has to answer to those interests. And I agree with you. Follow the money is the big. It's a cliche at this point, but I don't think enough journalists are doing it. And we do a lot of it. And look, there's a lot of money to follow. And we do it on both parties. We broke open the story about how the money behind the insurrectionist Republicans, the Republicans who tried to overturn the election.
Yep.
There's been kind of a little bit of a not exactly a fraud, but a little bit of a sleight of hand corporation saying, hey, we're ending our small PAC check donations to these members of Congress. Meanwhile, they're not saying that their executives are going to stop much larger donations to super PACs that those Republicans actually rely on for most of their money. So we've done some reporting on that. I think it's important to follow the money when it comes to the Democrats. I mean, Joe Biden's healthcare plan in his COVID relief bill is a plan almost ripped, at least I guess conceptually, from the insurance lobby. And the insurance lobby spends a lot of money in politics. So it's important to try to follow the money for both parties.
Yeah, I agree.
I did not realize until Jen brought it up that you actually were a fellow at the Center for American Progress. So I take it you had a...
Those are not our favorite people.
No, I take it you and Neera probably had an interesting relationship. If you can talk about that. And, I think the Center for American Progress is emblematic of the problems that exist in DC today as far as the neoliberal centrism that has grown. It's just out of control.
And can we just do like a sort of, Center for American Progress 101, because there could be people watching this that are like, what is that?
Exactly.
So if you would, since you probably would be able to describe it better to anyone, and if this isn't anything that is interesting remotely for you to talk about.
I'm happy to talk about it.
All right. Yeah.
So actually, that we're talking about it, I think I can show you. You see over there, up in the upper
right corner.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like right here, like in the upper right corner.
Yeah.
There's a Newsweek story about my time working at the Center for American Progress many years ago. And it was about how we developed a lot of pushback to George W. Bush. And I think I was the third or fourth employee of the Center for American Progress. And I worked for Bernie, and I worked for Dave Obey on the Appropriations Committee. And then I got a call from John Podesta asking me to work for the Center for American Progress. And, I was not exactly a kid, but I was pretty young, and I decided to do it. And it was I got a lot of my gray hair from that experience.
I was going to say, but what is this? What is the Center for American Progress?
Well, the Center for American Progress is supposed to be kind of a left of center place that develops ideas for the Democratic Party.
Right. So like the policy arm, the little policy writing arm and what we now think of as neoliberal centrist Dems.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily supposed to be that. And
Yeah.
I got myself into some little bit of friction, put it that way, when I worked there, because I took the mission seriously. And folks who are interested, you can Google this. I had friction because I took the mission seriously that we're supposed to hold both parties' feet to the fire.
Yeah.
That's what a 501c3, a nonprofit, is supposed to do, or at least, not be partisan. You can be ideological, but not partisan, and there's a difference. And actually, in 2005, Joe Biden's bankruptcy bill was finally, I think it was the third time it was getting a hearing in Congress under George W. Bush, newly reelected George W. Bush. And I published a report about the Democrats in the House who were working with the Republicans to help put Joe Biden's bankruptcy bill, which harmed consumers and helped the credit card industry, put that bill on George W. Bush's desk. And the House Democrats yelled at John Podesta about it. They dragged him in, had a meeting with him, yelled at him, told him, why is your guy doing this? Why is your organization doing this? And I got into some trouble. And my response at that point was, well, I thought we're supposed to hold both parties' feet to that. I thought, like, we're against this bill. I thought that's what, and the point in telling that story is, I guess I was naive enough back then to not realize that we may say we're nonpartisan, but actually the wink and the nod is that you only really go after Republicans. And so it was a nice, actually not nice, it was an unpleasant lesson in the wink and nod of Washington. And I do think you're right that in the ensuing years, the Center for American Progress, I wouldn't say it's been a conservative force, but it's certainly been a moderating force. It's certainly played off of the left. It's certainly pushed to try to...
It's impeding progress. They're impeding progress, which is ironic that they say that they're the Center for American Progress. And I I actually have noticed throughout my life that usually names of groups, organizations, PACs are the complete opposite of what they actually really are. And they do that on purpose. I mean, it's obvious. So most people, if you're a Democrat and you don't pay attention and you see that, oh, this Center for American Progress and they support Democrats and you just would assume that they're on your team. And they're not.
George Bush's bills, remember? The Healthy Forests Initiative, the Clear Skies initiatives, like those are initiatives to like pollute the skies and clear cut the forests. Like, the Center for American Progress really, in a lot of ways, has become the Center for Incremental Progress. So look, I agree with you, and I think that we need to understand, as a movement, like sort of who the allies are and who are not such allies. And the thing is that I don't want to be over the top about it. It's a gradient, right? Like the Center for American Progress is not as bad as AEI and the Heritage Foundation and then the Republican Party, right? Like it's a gradient. And
Cato Institute.
Yeah, the Cato Institute, exactly.
Of course.
The whole, frankly, it's the whole spectrum except for the actual left, right? The left is not really.
Well, because all the thing that they all have in common is they all answer to corporate donors. So they're only going to be able to be as far left as corporate will allow. So nothing is going to be Labor Party related. Like that's what I always say. We don't have a Labor Party. And that is really where we have this huge imbalance politically.
Well, look, I always put it this way. The easiest way to understand what the Democratic Party will automatically be for is you take every progressive issue, put it in a circle. Then you cut out everything that might ask corporations and the rich to give up even 1 cent or change their business model even 1 iota. And then you're left with like this little piece of your circle left. And that's what the Democratic Party will be for. So
they're basically Republicans that are LGBTQ friendly.
And
pro-choice.
You might, here's the thing, in the current debate, for instance, one thing that you might get away with is spending some money because that doesn't ask corporations to give up anything. It doesn't ask the rich to give up anything. So you may be able to spend some money. But the minute you ask corporations and billionaires to give up 1 cent or change their business model even 1 iota, all of a sudden that's a, quote, controversial issue, even if it is a policy that is wildly supported by huge majorities of the country.
I think they're very afraid of any type of structural changes that may be coming. I think there's a lot of unrest that's been going on that is now starting to surface in a way that I don't think people have really seen before. There was definitely a movement, back in, the spring of 2003 when it was, I can remember being at Rutgers in a lecture hall and listening to students talk about how we have to go to Iraq to give them their freedom. And it's like, are people really thinking like this? And then eventually, you start to recognize that the game is being run on you and more you become aware of how this is done. But I don't think anything really changed structurally in terms of people's ability to recognize what's going on until Bernie ran for president. I think when he did that, everyone who perceived it to be one way, like it's really these good guys versus these bad guys. It's not like that at all. It's corporate versus non-corporate. And Bernie cast a very bright light on it. And they're trying to put the cat back in the bag right now. I don't think it's going to happen. What do you think?
Well, I think you're right to say that Bernie catalyzed and was in a position to ride a wave of anger. I wrote a book back in 2000, I think it was 2008, called The Uprising. And the premise of the book was basically that the public is angry at a government that has decided brazenly not to deliver for regular people. And the contest in politics for the next generation would be which side can channel that righteous anger. And the thesis of the book was if the progressive movement does not harness that anger, then right-wing authoritarians will harness that anger. I'm not here to say I told you so, but
you did.
Sort of did.
No, and you should say that. And what's interesting is I wish I had known about this then, but what's interesting is this entire past few years, all I kept thinking is there's a populist uprising and it's going to go left or it's going to go right. And I really had this thought in my head as to whoever wins the presidency, it's going to go the other direction, because that's generally what we see. And that was really my issue with voting for Joe. It was, again, not a proud moment for me, but that is what I was always seeing, is that we were having an uprising. And what I'd like to do is connect the left with the right. And that's what we need a Labor Party that is just populist. And we take the wedge issues off the table and just start serving working people in labor. And most of those wedge issues shouldn't be government issues anyway.
The fact that they're holding up the $2,000 checks right now,
that's an issue.
I mean, how much tighter do you think you can squeeze people? That's what I would ask.
Yeah, look, the left-right coalition, when I worked for Bernie in the Congress, he had some specific issues that he was able to forge left-right coalitions. One example was importing cheaper prescription drugs, FDA-approved drugs from Canada. You had free traders on the right and you had progressives on the left that actually worked and kind of came from both sides to triangulate the center. And he was able to actually pass some legislation doing that. I think now I don't necessarily think of it as, left and right need to come together. I think of it as more actually even simpler, which is whoever is going to deliver material change and materially improve people's lives, or at least make a compelling case that their agenda is materially improving people's lives, will be the victors in our politics. And that's why this moment, and you mentioned the $2,000 checks, is so important. $2,000 checks is not only a clear promise by Joe Biden and the Democrats. It is as clear as George Bush saying, "Read my lips," right? That was you can't get clearer than that. Okay. So a promise, and it's not just read my lips, no new taxes, because new taxes is kind of vague. It's like, read my lips. This is a direct thing that's going directly into your pocket to materially improve, at least in the short to medium term, your life. If you can't deliver that, then and I don't care what your reasons are. Like, oh, Mitch McConnell's I can't deal with him, or the Republicans, or there's such obstructions. Or Joe Manchin's my big problem. It doesn't matter. Like the average person, it does not matter. And the other thing that doesn't matter to the average person is, oh, did you pass it with bipartisan support or by one vote? Nobody cares. The only thing people care about is help me deliver material change to my life, to improve my life right now, as you promised. So if they don't deliver that, they are creating the opportunity for right-wing authoritarians to say, see, I told you so. And there's one other point about this. It doesn't matter that the right-wing authoritarians may be the ones stopping the $2,000 checks. They will still turn right around and say, you see, don't vote for the Democrats because they promised you something and they're not going to deliver it. We just published a story at dailyposter.com about this. It's very reminiscent of the public option. In 2009, Obama, Biden, campaign on the public option. They get in, the Republicans threaten to vote it down. They ultimately stop it. Obama and Biden back off, say, well, I'm not sure it's essential. The Republicans voted it down once. I'm not going to go back to the well. And then at one point, Obama's like, I didn't even campaign on it, just like totally lied, right? And then finally comes to the Senate in 2010. The Democrats won't even offer it up for a floor vote. Guess what? We get no public option. And then soon after, the same Republicans who, in fairness, did block the public option, they turn right around. They're like, look, he can't even deliver health care for me. He promised all this stuff. And guess what? The Democrats get shellacked in the 2010 election. We have to do everything we can to not relive that history. That history is a cautionary tale here. If you can't deliver checks to people that you promised, a wildly popular issue. It won't matter what reason you cite. It will only matter that you didn't deliver.
Yeah. The Democrats are very big on reasons and excuses, which is why I believe, that they actually prefer having the Republicans be in charge and prefer having a Republican in the White House, because then they don't have to do anything. And I think it's that Mick resistance. It's like, oh, well, it's not us, it's them. When in fact, they're all answering to the same interests. So it's like this controlled opposition, like we're being played like it's a fake color war. And only the people that are really the left people are in that sort of awareness of that and wanting to do things to help the collective, and everyone else is just business as usual.
Well, look, I think at this point they don't have an excuse. If they don't deliver, they are imperiling their own majority. I'm not willing to say that they would lose, because you don't underestimate at this point the Republicans' willingness to put up unelectable lunatics. Look, we've seen that in Colorado. I'll give you an example of that. The Democrats in Colorado, and to be fair, I'm literally the spouse of a Democratic legislator.
Yeah.
In Colorado. So the Democrats have delivered some things. They have not been able to deliver everything. There's all sorts of structural reasons. But the Democratic Party in Colorado, like potentially the Democratic Party in nationally, has benefited from the fact that the Colorado Republican Party has not put up electable people. They put up extremist right-wing people who are so wildly out of control that even a kind of moderate, I don't even like to use the word moderate, but a sort of status quo Democratic Party has been able to win elections. And the Democratic Party may be able to get away with that in 2022, maybe in 2024. But the point is that you're sort of ceding your future to the Republicans deciding or being unable to put up electable people, as opposed to seizing the future for yourself and creating an actual sustainable majority by actually delivering for people. And so I don't want to say, like, if the Democrats don't deliver the $2,000 checks, they're going to lose in 2022, but what I'm going to say is that if you don't deliver, you're making it easier for right-wing authoritarians to win in 2022 and 2024. And I believe that the next Donald Trump will be way smarter, way shrewder, and way more dangerous than Donald Trump. I mean, we really got lucky that in the sense, not that we didn't get lucky that Donald Trump won. We got lucky that that the right-wing authoritarian who won was a buffoon like Donald Trump, because that's sort of a warning that the next one maybe won't be a buffoon and will be actually way more dangerous.
Tom Cotton's coming.
There's a lot of people that could be worse.
Tom Cotton's the one. I mean, if anybody, David, you've been in politics a long time. It's like you kind of see these things coming before they actually happen. Tom Cotton's he's just biding his time. He is as in bed with the military-industrial complex as anybody on the right. He's actually very good on the stump, if you've seen him. He's good. Look, they're going to... Let's
not give them ideas of potential, neo-fascist.
Well, I thought it was going to be Cotton or Hawley. I don't know how much Hawley's... I mean, I don't think Hawley's among the Republican base.
I got to tell you, Hawley's best option at this point is to become a full-blown populist and say, I'm going to make sure everybody gets these $2,000 checks. Like, he's going to have to cross party lines and say, I'm going to do this for the people. If he does that, he might be able to, resuscitate his.
Well, he's playing a really both. I mean, it's interesting. It's like darkly interesting. It's not like interesting, like positively interesting. It's like interesting, and he may have miscalculated, but clearly his theory was, I'm going to forge bipartisan alliances with people like Bernie Sanders on things that are truly economically populist. Give everyone $1,200, $2,000. But then I'm still a Republican. I'm still relying on the Republican base. So to compensate for that with my base, I'm going to go wildly right wing on things like, overturning the entire election. Like, that's quite a kind of wild calculation to make, right? It's sort of the kind of a bizarro version of the moderate Republican. Like the moderate Republican theory is like, I'll be here sort of in the quote unquote center in Washington, and I'll like make deals, and I'll be sort of Mitt Romney moderate. Instead, Hawley's like, I'll go here with Bernie Sanders, and then I'll go like here with like Ted Cruz, and like sort of try to put the like these two things together. And like, I think he went so far to the right that, you know, in theory, I mean, you never know, right? Take the long view. But in theory, he kind of overreached. I mean, obviously what he did with the election was abhorrent and disgusting and just totally grotesque. Like just absolutely, I don't care if you're a Republican or not. If you're trying to overturn the election, that's just totally and completely grotesque.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. And I think it's a topic that does have to be discussed because a lot of people after the campaign have not really had the opportunity to really address this. But, you know, it's so amazing how anytime the establishment is saying something is taking place, it's usually always the opposite. So when somebody like, you know, Hillary Clinton, who could not accept losing to Trump, made up the Russian boogeyman, now Trump is doing the same thing, saying that the election was stolen. Last I checked, the only election stealing that took place in this country was to ensure that Bernie Sanders did not become the Democratic nominee and ultimately the president of this country.
Twice.
And I think that going forward, I mean, you know, you can't live in the past. There are things that we have to do going forward. I think a couple of the ideas that could really work are obviously ranked choice voting. And I think we have to make a very strong push for hand-marked paper ballots. I can understand people not trusting voting on electronic voting machines. There's always the possibility, you know, of something going wrong. You know, everyone has their conspiracies about, well, who owns the voting machines? As far as I'm concerned, as long as you're able to count the ballots and you're able to give people choices, I think that makes all the difference in the world. Case in point, in Maine, they have ranked choice voting. The Green Party has no infrastructure whatsoever. Case in point, Howie Hawkins. But Lisa Savage was able to get over 5% of the vote. Now, that may not seem like much, but in general, the fact that you're even given another option is appealing to other people. And I do think that if we're ever going to get past this notion of theft of elections, fair and free elections, I think, and Jen, I'm sure you would agree, those are, you know, a couple of those ideas that I think would work. But in terms of what transpired during the primary, how do you feel it ultimately went down from the perspective of somebody who feels like
basically we think Bernie got cheated, and we want to know why he didn't fight about that. And we want to know why Bernie didn't say, wait a minute, something is not right here. Between Iowa and Nevada and everything in between, something went very awry.
Especially with what happened in Iowa with Pete Buttigieg and that whole, the way that whole thing went down.
I feel like was just a scam.
Well, look, I'll say a few things that are broad without being exactly specific. Typically, I find, having now worked in politics for 20 years, that politics is much more Veep than House of Cards. Okay, so House of Cards presents a world in which 17,000 pieces are put into place, and there's, you know, puppet masters and the like.
Yeah.
You know, and I am kind of with, I think it was Noam Chomsky who sort of said this, which is that typically these vast conspiracy theories aren't actually completely as vast as we think, because human beings wouldn't be able to keep secrets as well as these sort of theories are. So all of that to say, it's not to say that there aren't bad faith people out there trying to rig elections. It's only to say that lots of what we see in politics is more Veep, which is a lot of incompetent, not well-trained or sort of not nefarious, just ill-equipped people running around trying to figure things out, which of course allows for an environment for bad faith actors to do bad things. So my point is only in saying that I think there were bad faith people in the Iowa caucuses, for instance, but there was also a lot of Veep in the Iowa caucuses, with the app and with all that stuff. A lot of it was just like they just blew it, right? Like it just didn't, it was ridiculous, right? So I don't like to use the word like steal. I do think that the Democratic Party process is systemically rigged against people like Bernie Sanders, against anybody who runs against the establishment. It
I'm
is
familiar.
inherently rigged. It is. Like, that's not, shouldn't even be up for debate. It's rigged from the establishment endorsements. It's rigged from money. It's rigged from how hard it is to get, in many places, to get even on the ballot. Okay. And again, I'm the spouse of somebody who ran against a Democratic incumbent and defeated a Democratic incumbent from scratch, right? That, I think, was the first time in 40 years it had ever happened in Colorado. Don't quote me on that, but the point is that the system openly, without having a conspiracy theory, the system openly is. I mean, I remember that whole race. Like, I remember being like, wow, why is it this difficult for you to just get on the ballot? Like, how is it this hard? Like, it's insane. Like, why is it? So the point is that I'm a kind of reporter who believes that 80% of the nefarious stuff that's happening in politics is right there to be read right in the fine print. You don't have to suss out some secret. It's right there, right? Yeah. So as it relates to Bernie, like, look, running in a primary against first, the Hillary Clinton, the most famous Democrat in the world in 2016, running as Joe Biden, a former vice president, like, that's a real uphill climb. I mean, people have asked me, oh, why did Bernie lose? Did he lose because of this? Did he lose because of that? And look, I have my own, shoulda, coulda, wouldas. Like, I was somebody who was pushing for us to contrast a lot more sharply with Biden than we ended up doing. And at times we did. And there's a lot of shoulda, coulda, woulda. But if you want a reason why Bernie Sanders didn't win the primary, I'm sorry. It's not a very satisfying reason. Okay? And the largest pot is like a pot, like this slice and this slice. Okay, you want the biggest slice of the pie? Immediate past vice presidents of parties almost never lose their party's nomination. It almost never happens. Like 70 or 80 years. I mean, you got to count Alvin Barkley, who like kind of only sort of ran 70 years ago. And if you're not counting him, it's like 100 years. So my point is not to say that it wasn't winnable. It's only to say that if you're looking at the pie, why did we not? Yeah, we could have done this, we could have done that, and this could have rigged another. But 75% of it is like the dude was the immediate past vice president, and they don't typically lose. Now you can analyze that and say, why does the Democratic Party, why does the Republican, why do voters typically reward the immediate past vice president of their party? And that's a fair question, because it's a very bizarre phenomenon, right? A country that claims to be unhappy with its politics is constantly re-electing incumbents and constantly renominating these people who were in the government that the people in polls say they are upset with. So there's a really weird cognitive dissonance here that, like, that people get into government, then they're constantly reelected from a population that says it's not happy with its government. It's extremely strange.
Well, we have a non-functioning republic. That's what I call it. We have a non-functioning republic. When you have 3/4 of the people want a certain policy and that's not the policy that we have, then there is a disconnect between what we want and what is happening. That's a non-functioning republic.
I agree.
That happened a long time ago.
What I've just laid out is even more weird, right? Which is, it's one thing for the government, the legislators who are bankrolled by corporations and the like, not delivering for their constituents. It's a whole other thing for voters to say, I'm unhappy with the government. I don't like the parties. I think Washington's corrupt, and I'm just voting to reelect the incumbent, and I'm voting for the existing party leaders over and over and over again in an aristocratic sort of dynastic.
Well, we like monarchies, apparently. We like it. And I'll tell you what, though, but yet all of what you said makes sense to me, except for then I keep having this nagging image of Barack Obama in my head, sort of saying something like along the lines of, well, if Bernie looks like he's going to do well, I'll have to get involved. And then I recall him actually doing so. Was I imagining that? Because that's what it seemed like to me. Well, I don't think that it would have gone this way without him.
Look, Obama, I think, has played frankly, I think he's played an incredibly, incredibly destructive role in so many ways. And I know that's not a popular thing to say, but
It
I
is
will
here.
I will give you my spiel. Barack Obama came in and could have been FDR. He had a mandate to do essentially whatever
Whatever he wanted.
And he used his power to shield Wall Street and the health insurance industry from real systemic change. I'm sorry, like, I don't enjoy that. I don't like that. I think it's the biggest
devastating. It's heartbreaking to me.
It really is. He also put the thumb on the scales for Hillary Clinton. He essentially took Joe Biden out of obscurity, made him his vice president. I mean, there's a lot of like 2 degrees of separation to Barack Obama for what we're living through. I would argue that his refusal to adequately respond to the financial crisis in a serious way, in an FDR-like way, ultimately set the stage for the Tea Party, ultimately set the stage, the conditions for Donald Trump to dishonestly take advantage of. I think this is indisputable. I know a lot of people don't like to hear it. They don't
want anybody to criticize him, but he is worthy of criticism. And
but I'm not, the thing is, I'm not even like at a certain point, it's not like criticism. It's like mourning. It's like mourning, mourning, right? Like, it's like sad. It's like this. I think we're going to look back at 2009 and 2010, if we're being honest, as the period of the most opportunity and the greatest failure to take advantage of that opportunity, to the greatest destruction in the last, since at least the Great Depression. I mean, imagine if you really rewind, and granted, in all admission, I'm working right now on a long series about the sort of through line from the financial crisis to Donald Trump.
It's connected. It's important to see that.
It is. Yeah. And it's important to remember it now, because if we redo that loop, we're going to get worse than Donald Trump. But I think that we have to understand that I mean, because they didn't just have 51 Senate votes, they had 60 Democrats in that Senate caucus.
No, they had a filibuster-proof Senate, and we couldn't even get a public option.
But
hold on. Not only could we not get a public option, we couldn't even get a floor vote in the Senate.
Yeah.
We couldn't even get a vote.
Yeah.
On the floor. So, like, it's painful because Barack Obama is a compelling figure. He is a likable figure. He is a smart person. He is, I spent a whole day with him in 2006. I wrote a Nation article about spending the day just with him, trailing him, and like, he's a super compelling, smart person, which actually makes it that much worse and that much more sad, because he knows, and he refused to have the courage to do what was necessary. Now, I grant everybody who says that, look, he was facing first African-American president. He faced unique challenges with that. And, are you going to get caricatured? And he had to navigate that. I totally understand that. That makes total sense. But he had, every president.
He lined his cabinet with Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, every president has to navigate different things. And okay, you had to navigate that. And I get that. But he came in with this huge mandate. And, the thing is and we go back to the point that we talked about. If people are mad, rightly so. If people are starving and struggling and being thrown out of their homes, the anger is going to go somewhere if you don't deliver.
Yeah.
It's going somewhere. It went to the Republicans in 2010. Obama managed to survive in 2012, but the Republicans kept control of Congress. It ultimately became Donald Trump. And the point for now is, if the Democrats don't learn, you must deliver. If you can't even put $2,000 in people's pockets that you promised in a George Bush read my lips kind of way, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think you're just going to get? Maybe you'll get away with it for a while, but what do you think is going to happen?
Guillotines, man. I say you're not going to be able to build your moats wide enough. And if somebody was putting a guillotine in front of my house, I would have some serious self-reflection as to why that would be. And yet these people are completely unfazed by this.
David, I think it's a great segue into a topic that I know a lot of people have obviously been, it's been a hot button issue as of late. obviously, force the vote became a circumstance where a lot of people felt that there's not enough work being done on the progressive left, albeit it's not a big chunk of representatives, but enough to tip the balance of power if they actually choose to use it, which they could. I think that we obviously know who the person was that was driving a very heavy wedge in independent media and, saying that people are sellouts and this and that. I do believe that the people in question that were in elected office probably could have said more and, could have been a little bit more vocal about, why it probably wasn't the best strategy. I personally think it was. I thought it was a good idea. I don't think it was the best strategy because at that time, Republicans did control the Senate. Now that the Democrats are in control of all three elected branches, I would think now would be the time to really, form some type of a movement. You want to say it's for Medicare for all, whatever it is. But like you said, the Democrats did not anticipate winning the Georgia runoff elections. Now they have no choice, and now they really are backed into a corner. But I'm curious as to what your thoughts are when it comes to independent media, because it does seem like there is this fracturing, this splintering, if you will, that's been going on as of late. And very, very easily, people are willing to throw people under the bus. People were calling Jen a sellout, for God's sake, the other day. I mean, at some point, you got to say, all right, maybe we're taking this a little too far. Maybe we're not being very rational about this. But I can also understand, as you alluded to, the anger that is amongst the people.
But the left
right now
is eating its own, and it should not be being spearheaded by progressive talking heads. It's not serving us in any way.
Well, I have many thoughts. I mean, my first thought is that I don't believe differences over strategy are differences over values. I think that although I will grant folks that the suspicion is that folks in power portray differences of values as differences in tactics. So by that, I mean, you often hear politicians say, hey, listen, I want to do this thing, but I can't do it because of this or that procedure. It's just, I don't disagree with you on the strategy, on the values. I disagree with you on the tactics. But I think outside of that sphere, I think we all know who, I mean, it's not hard to understand who's like, who's on the side of the right values when it comes to guaranteed medical care for all. Like, if you're berating people who've been in this fight for 20 plus years, you're pretending that a disagreement or even just a discussion about strategy is a disagreement about values. And I think that's where it's dishonest. And what I think is not productive is a independent media that tries to make an opportunity out of division among people who obviously agree on the values. Like, we should be able to have honest conversations about what is a good strategy, what concerns we have about a strategy, or what should be added to a strategy. You should be able to have that discussion without being fearful that you will be portrayed as selling out on the values. And, I think it's very, like, we all know who's on the right side, who's an ally on the values.
Or at least as the best that we're going to get. How about that? How about that? It's what is the menu?
And I also don't think people realize how far we really have come in 5 years.
Oh my God.
I mean, Bernie alone has changed the narrative on Medicare for all. It was a non-starter for decades. Now, all of a sudden, people talk about it like, well, maybe universal health care, but it has to be this way or that. At least
we're talking about it.
We're talking about it every day.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's an example. Like, right now, wherever you are on Medicare for all, the absolute, and I mean absolute minimum that should be expected out of this Congress is a crystal clear vote, if not full passage, of a public health insurance option.
Yeah.
Every Democratic Senate candidate, and this year's Democratic Senate candidates were handpicked by the party, and they were conservative Democrats. Even they campaigned on a public option. Now, if you say that, will be some people who will say, even mentioning a public health insurance option means you're selling out Medicare for all, which is just bullshit. Like, it's just ridiculous, right? Like, You can be for Medicare for all and have a theory that I'd like Medicare for all right now. There should even be a vote on Medicare for all right now. But at the absolute minimum, they must pass a public health insurance option that then can be broadened out to cover more and more people. Or there should be a bill to expand Medicare to people 55,
Right.
lower the age. Like, it doesn't have to be either or, and we don't have to portray either or as a sellout of the ultimate goal. It's not a sellout of the ultimate goal. If you want to know what a sellout of the ultimate goal looks like, look at our reporting at dailyposter.com about what Joe Biden put in his COVID bill. We broke the story, and a lot of sort of normie Dems didn't want to hear it. We broke the story that he campaigned on a public option. He campaigned on lowering the Medicare age, I think, to 60. Or at least he said he supported that. And in his COVID bill, all he put in there was subsidies for private insurance companies to go on the ACA exchanges, which are wildly expensive, which provide not adequate care in many cases, which deny people's claims. That's a sellout. That's what a sellout looks like. Because he could have put a public option in there. Right. He could have put lowering the he could have put expanding Medicaid in there. So that's what a sellout is. A sellout is not, look, you want Medicare for all, but you also simultaneously are pushing an expansion of Medicaid, or you're pushing lower the eligibility age, or a public health insurance option. That is, I'd like the whole loaf, but I'm willing to, in lieu of the whole loaf, I'm willing to also push for half the loaf or 2/3 of the loaf, right? Like, so it's important to understand, like, and the thing that bothers me, not to go on too long about it, but the thing that bothers me is that everyone in this debate, in this conversation, especially on the left, everyone knows what I just said is true. Everyone knows that, right? Like, everyone
knows it's factually true.
Is bad faith. That's not everyone on all the different sides knows that's bad faith when we're talking to allies. And so then the question becomes, are you trying to actually narcissistically create a opportunity for yourself by division, right? I mean, I think there are times when it's right to criticize inside of the left. We did a story, for instance, at Daily Poster about how good progressive groups that I like, right? They were saying, hey, it's okay that like Neera Tanden got appointed, and it's okay that some of these sort of not great appointees got appointed. And we wrote a story being like, actually, that's not your role to say that. Like, your role, if you're, on the progressive left, is not, you're undermining. That's not your job. Is to make palatable, nominees who aren't great. But so it's not to say that I don't think the left should criticize, but it is to say, like, be honest about it. Like, just like right. We all it's that old idea, like, it when you see it, honesty when you see it, dishonesty when you see it.
I agree. I don't hold it against any of them. I really don't like even talking about this because I don't even like giving it airtime because the whole thing is ridiculous and juvenile.
I'm gonna share a story very briefly because, David, of all the people that had to deal with Jimmy, I think you came into the conversation in the most genuine way possible. You came to it from a factual perspective. You came to it from a strategic perspective, not this, let's mudsling back and forth and say that my side's right and the other side is wrong. Like, I can't even with, the whole, Jimmy versus Sam Cedar nonsense. The issue that I have, and this goes back over a year, and we seldom didn't want to tell the story because we don't want to get involved in the drama. But this is essential to one of the things that became very difficult for us because we were ghosted in many ways in our campaign against Wasserman Schultz because there were dishonest actors on the left who were working against Jen, who were basically perceiving her to be something that she wasn't. I was called an agent of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, for goodness sake. What did end up happening that I think a lot of people need to know, and this story needs to get out there. Jimmy came down here a year ago for a comedy show in Miami. And I would say for the 2 hours that he was on stage, and mind you, I know Jimmy on a personal level. I had dinner with him in Chicago. So I texted him to let him know that we would be at the show. So we were at the show for 2 hours. And for an hour of the show, he proceeds to talk about nothing but Debbie Wasserman Schultz. By the time the show was over, he not only does not even acknowledge the fact in front of 500 people, mind you, he is very popular. He gets a lot of people out to his shows.
It was full. It was definitely full house. Yeah.
He not only did not mention that Jen was in the audience and could have easily said, this would have been infinitely more valuable than of ever going on his show. Just the opportunity to say, Jen Perlman running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. How many people probably would have signed up to volunteer on the campaign?
That was like almost in our district.
Would have phone banked. Oh, it was like 10, 15
But you need to get back to the best part of the story.
But the best part of the story was not only did he not mention that Jen was there, he had Tim Canova, who was in the audience, stand up and take a bow to the crowd. If that wasn't a slap in Jen's face, I don't know what is. But it was done in such deliberate fashion. And I'm thinking,
he did it very spitefully to hurt me.
We're trying to beat maybe of all the people, and you really know what goes on the Hill. Are there really that many worse representatives in all of Congress, not just the Democratic Party, than Debbie Wasserman Schultz? Wouldn't you think it would make sense to, even if you're not a big fan?
I mean, but just somebody who's willing to curse out AOC as a sellout who's been there for 2 years for not jumping onto this strategy. And yet this is the same person who ghosted the person running against the person who he made his whole show about bashing.
And not only that, but even to this day, I mean, a lot of people who know Canova now, he was actually going around saying very negative things about us, about Jen. And of course, he came out in support of Trump. He was even at one of the Stop the Steal rallies here in Broward. And I'm just thinking, you know, Jimmy has never even acknowledged that he was wrong about this. And that
he's still friends with him. That doesn't mean anything.
You see, that's the part.
But basically Tim was telling everybody that Peter that was a plant for Debbie and that I took George Soros money. And basically as a result of Tim saying that, Jimmy ghosted us and purposefully just did not even mention our existence, no matter how often he talked about Debbie.
Like, I never would have minded Jen even having gone on Jimmy's show, but just the fact that he
never even mentioned
the fact that he was here and the fact that he really could have made a difference for us just by a slew of new volunteers who easily would have come on board and would have, given us this opportunity. Jen still managed to get as many votes as Tim did with 10% of the money. I mean, it's absolutely incredible.
And I gave him a really expensive pack of weed gummies that I brought as like a nice gesture. And you know what, to be honest with you, I'm annoyed about that. I should have never given him those because that was even after the show.
But the point is, for those people out there who think that
this is a real fighter for all,
that Jimmy is not above criticism.
Hypocrisy.
We can tell you that, and again, Jen does not get involved with any of this stuff.
I didn't want to talk about it. I hate talking about it. It's infuriating.
But don't think that Jimmy hasn't done things that aren't. I don't want to say nefarious. That's not the word I would use.
Counterproductive.
Like we said.
Well, look, my only response to it is, I've tried to remain factual. I don't think it's productive. I think it's productive to have debates, vehement debates, disagreements about tactics, about strategies. I don't think it's productive to berate obvious allies. And I reject the idea that people like AOC or the Squad are not allies. I just reject it. Like, you're going to have to show me a lot more.
I do too.
I may not agree with, I don't agree with everything that AOC or all of her tactics. I mean, I don't, I'm not saying she's infallible or perfect or any of this. Like, they're politicians. You got to have a realistic attitude about this. But they're sellouts. They deserve to be cursed out. I'm sorry. I just reject that. That's
I reject it. I think it's and I never am one to play like a sexism card or that kind of thing whatsoever. But the way that he turned and spoke directly at AOC in the camera and was talking to her was the most disgusting, misogynistic tone. Like, how anyone can think that would productively move things forward in any positive way.
Yeah, and you can say that I'm jaded, right? I'm living here in Colorado, where our senators are Michael Bennet and John Hickenlooper, two Democrats who, if you want to know what a problematic Democratic representative is, I give you my blue state, Colorado, electing those senators, those people who you have to worry they're going to support the filibuster. Those are real problems. Those are not allies. right?
Right.
Those are real. So I'm living here in like that world, and then it's like, oh, AOC is the problem. You're like, what are you talking about? Like I may not agree with AOC, but like, you want to see like a person who's like undermine the cause? Like, here are my 2 senators from a blue state, right? Like, so I think we all have to like take a deep breath, be honest with ourselves about who the allies are, who are not our allies, and be honest with ourselves about who we're having disagreements over tactics with and who we're having disagreements over values with. And I think it's pretty clear. It's not hard to know. Like, you know, when there's a disagreement with Michael Bennett or John Hickenlooper, typically it's a disagreement over values. It's not a disagreement over tactics. When there's a disagreement with like AOC and the squad, typically it's a disagreement over tactics. It's not a disagreement over values. Like, show me some evidence that it's a disagreement over actual values. Like, I don't buy it. Like, and I don't. And by the way, I don't think it's a disagreement either over courage. Like, AOC and the squad are, unfortunately, I think, quite literally risking their lives.
Oh,
yeah.
Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar is. I can't even.
And one thing I will say to the audience, for those people who don't think that the insurrection was a serious thing, and granted, there were about 100,000 people that were in DC, and yes, okay, 1,000 people went in, but do you need to tell me that if they had an opportunity to get their hands on Alex, that they wouldn't have done something very irrational?
You know who was not scared was Corey, by the way.
Well, no.
Nothing's going to scare her. Corey's like
Jen and Corey were slate mates with
but it's just
Congress,
like they'd asked her if she was worried, and she's like, "Yeah, no, I come from the streets."
That stuff is real. I used to host radio here in Colorado, drive time radio, and I walked by a picture of Alan Berg every day. Alan Berg was the radio host in Colorado who was killed by Nazis. Literally, you can look it up. You know the movie Talk Radio? It's sort of vaguely about him. And I got all sorts of threats when I was on radio here in Colorado. It's not to say that I'm like a martyr or like, oh, feel bad for me.
No,
but like, that's real. Like, that's real. And the people in the squad, the legislators, I mean, they are, you know, I don't want to say they're at risk. Hopefully they're not at risk, but like, that's a scary experience. So sort of saying that they're not even courageous and they're selling it. Like, I just don't.
They get death threats.
I don't buy it. Like, I don't buy it. And you're going to have like the burden of proof on that is high. And like, I wake up and when I pay attention to politics, I'm thankful people like that are even willing to be there, because like, life is short. Like, those people are, you know, I mean, it's, I don't want to overstate it. Like, being in Congress, you have people worship you and you're famous and, you know, like you have entourages and that's all cool. But like, ultimately, like day to day, like that's, you know, there's other ways to kind of live in the world where you don't have to deal with that. And like, they're dealing with it and they're fighting a good fight. And like, I appreciate it. It's not to say they don't deserve pressure. It's not to say they don't deserve criticism. Like, believe me, like if they sell out, I'll be pressuring them. I'll be
right. When he starts taking money from the military-industrial complex, then we'll call her out.
Offer an amendment and they don't do it, and they have got some BS reason. Like, I'll be there. But like, there's a way to criticize them in a respectful way, because ultimately you're going to have to show me that they are disagreeing with me on values, not just on tactics.
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing with like, you know, corporate Democrats who we all know are corporate Democrats who are disagreeing with us on values and pretending it's only about tactics. Like Joe Manchin is disagreeing with us on values, not on tactics. Like, he can say, "Oh, I just don't like the filibuster." Like, no, it's like that's a lot of nonsense. Like, that's a disagreement on values. You're a conservative. You don't really believe in like serious change. You're gonna have to be pushed, kicking and screaming, to like actually do anything. So like, that's not a disagreement on tactics. That's values. I hate to cut this short, but
Thank you so much.
If for anybody out there, one more time, dailyposter.com, please sign up. David,
thank you.
We can't thank you enough. We just realized we've been talking for an hour, but it just goes to show you it's been an amazing conversation.
Thank you for having me. And I should tell you, as much as I love Denver, I'm super jealous that you're in and near the ocean.
Oh, real? And I'm a mountain girl stuck in a beach town. Like, I went to Boulder.
I missed my time at the I'm like it's driving me crazy. So
well, after this is over, if you're ever in Florida, we'll get together.
You know what? Just take solace in the fact that you live in a state that actually wants to make sure that COVID gets under control.
Well,
you have legal recreational weed. Enjoy your life.
Yeah, we're in a state where we have a governor who literally is trying to kill people.
us.
So
yes, I would not trade my state government for your state government.
There you go.
But like right now, like the beach sounds pretty sweet. So
keep an
when
eye
you go
out.
to the beach, just know, like I want you to like send me like a thought wave, like I'm here. Like
I will, and I've actually been going lately. I'll go,
Yeah,
and
should.
I will.
You really,
I do have to be coming out
vibes.
to Colorado as well. Keep an eye on Anna Escamani, who will be most likely running for
governor
in
of down
Florida.
here.
Things are going to start to pick up in the next few months, so we hope we'll have you back again at some
good. I will. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, David.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.